I do, I want to get us all hyped up and prepared for a phenomenal, a fantastic guest speaker, straight from the wild west of the United States, with roots in California, Texas, and Colorado. We're going to welcome on this stage the amazing, the incredible Wendy Nather, everybody! Yeah! Wendy, I really can't thank you enough for being here on this stage with me. Let's take a nice photo right there. Yeah, that's the camera.
Look at her. Look at her.
Look at you, Wendy. How about that hat, y'all, huh?
Yeah.
And that's 1% genuine, authentic Texas white hat and a pink hat. How about that, y'all? All right. Are you ready for Wendy to take us into the wild web to look at fighting stupidity and malice in the wild, wild web? Are you ready? Yeah, you are ready. All right, Wendy, are you ready?
I think I'm ready.
Okay, let's have the slides up. Here's your clicker.
Right.
Here's your monitor. The stage is yours. I'll be right over there in case anybody needs some wrangling, so you all stay nice, okay? Wendy, it's you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. Thank you, everybody, and I want to thank Karen Ahoti, my sister from Fort Kick-Ass. Thank you very much for having me. I want to thank the B-Sides team, all 50 volunteers. I'll thank you individually when I get out of here. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And also I want to thank Sunil Yu and Mike Kaiser for letting me have the insides of their very smart brains. Now, I'm going to tell you that I'm kind of nervous. This is kind of intimidating because here I am in the cyber capital of the world at the B-Sides where all the smart people come together. It's kind of scary. So I had to come up with something. So what I figured out was I was just going to make shit up. So that's what I'm going to do. Make shit up here live because that's what we do every day, right? In cybersecurity. We look at something and go, wow, that just happened. Okay, now what do we do? So we are making shit up as fast as we can, and that's what this talk is going to be about. So when they asked me to come and speak, they said the theme was the Wild, Wild Web. And my first thought was, okay, wow, should we tame the Wild, Wild Web or should we try to leave it wild? And I was kind of in a COVID fugue. I got COVID for the first time last month, so I was just lying there going, okay, tame it, leave it wild, and then these thoughts started coming. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. I will tell you right now that I do not have the answers. I have only questions, and sometimes they're pretty good questions, sometimes they're not, but I'm going to depend on you to help me figure this out. Now, why am I giving this talk? Well, first of all, I grew up in Texas. I live in Colorado now. So that kind of helps me be the right person to be on the stage. But even more importantly, I learned to program. I got into tech right here in Tel Aviv, at Tel Aviv University, in 1975. Yeah, so I was here we were Olim Chadashim, and my father was at the astronomy department here at Tel Aviv University. And I told him one day, I said, Dad, I'm bored. Don't ever do that. Don't tell your parents you're bored. So he threw a basic manual at me and said, here, I want you to write a program to make the bell on the teletype ring. Does anybody even know what a teletype is? You probably, yes, you do. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it looked kind of like this, not exactly. This is not me. But this is where I learned to program, and it set the course for my entire life. So I feel like I'm coming back home, full circle. This is what the ARPANET looked like at the time in 1975. Very small network. And at that time, there were a lot of assumptions that were made about the design of the ARPANET and how it should be operated. And one of the things that they decided on was in order to make it as available as possible to withstand a nuclear explosion or anything like that, that kind of disruption, all of the emphasis was on availability. And so in order to get it up and running, they did what they had to do. So some of the ideas, the assumptions that they made were like this quote from my friend Michael Bryan, who used to write blogs as Mr. Protocol back in the day. He was running some of the early BBN networking. What they all said was be strict in what you send, but generous in what you accept. So in other words, accept anything in terms of network traffic, but be correct in what you send. Now, accept anything from anybody? Would anybody say this today? No, absolutely not. But this was the open version of what we thought back when it was a really, really small network. So times have changed. Back then, it was a very small network. Everybody who ran the networking stuff knew what they were doing. It was a very small community. You could trust everyone. You could call somebody up at another site and say, hey, we got to troubleshoot this, and it was fine. There was really only one kind of political agenda, and I'm sorry about that, but the US kind of said it. There wasn't any spam. That didn't come around until the mid-'80s. I remember the very first spam. It was US green card spam. We were already really ticked off about it. This was on Usenet. And there was no cybercrime. So it was a much, much simpler time, and today we know that's not going to work anymore because we have to deal with stupidity and malice. Malice meaning people doing bad things on purpose. And a lot of people, since tech has become democratized, anybody can stand up a server anywhere and do anything, and it can easily break a bunch of other things. I remember when I actually broke about 18 servers on the ARPANET that were using SendMail because I put unbalanced parentheses in my name variable on my email, and it just went and broke a whole bunch of stuff. That is still happening now. Not from me, but you know, I'm trying to behave now, but anybody can do this now. And there are all sorts of geopolitical agendas managing and setting policy for different parts of the internet. You know, let's think of what happened this last weekend with Russia with the coup that could have been an email. It was that short. And of course, everybody's abusing common functionality for different things, for conflict, bullying, piling on, for getting attention, making money, stealing money, and just basically fucking around and finding out. Sorry about my Texan accent here, saying these bad words. But remember the Morris worm? We called him RTFM, Robert Tappan fucking Morris, when that worm got out. So we have to deal with a whole bunch of other things now. Now, the interesting thing that I've noticed over the decades is that from an operational point of view, we have been starting with centralized infrastructure and then sweeping to distributed. Remember when everything was a mainframe, everything was centralized, and then we brought things into a distributed era with distributed computing, client server, networked disks, things like that. Then we would start centralizing things again, and we would find that the problem, there's an upside and a downside to each of these swings. When it's centralized, it's more manageable, but at the same time, it's less available because it's a single point of failure. You can take something out. You want to see, why do you want to see my face? Why? Oh, my pretty eyes, ma'am. That was great. Did you hear that? Go say that to somebody else that you like. Pretty eyes, ma'am. I appreciate that. But if it's decentralized, it's less manageable. But on the upside, you're going for availability. So we've been swinging up and down all of these years. And there are effects on the governance, too. So how you manage these things, if you are centralized, your risk as a user of the centralized service goes up because a centralized entity is thinking about their risk. They're not thinking about your risk. On the other hand, if it's decentralized, you can manage your own risk because you have your own instance, your own server, whatever. On the downside, or on the upside rather, with centralized, you only have one place to go if you want to complain about something. if you need something, if you're having a conflict and you need somebody to resolve it for you. If it's centralized, that's easier. If it's decentralized, you have to negotiate with a lot of other people. You have to either try to get consensus, which, by the way, is what's wrong with blockchain, but we won't even go there. Blockchain is fine until you need to resolve a disagreement, and then, consensus is really hard. If you believe consensus is easy, get 5 of your friends and try to decide where to go eat tonight. You're never going to figure that out. So negotiations go up when it's decentralized. And so I'm thinking about all these swings. As I'm thinking about, do we tame the wild, wild web? Do we try to keep it wild? How do we govern it? And you may be thinking right now, why am I hearing about this? Why, I'm just a hacker, I don't care about this policy stuff. But the thing is, whatever we make up together, whatever we decide, whatever you go out and advocate for is what we're going to have to live with. So that's why I'm talking with you about it. So I ended up thinking, is there a middle ground? And, of course, to quote, here's your first meme, here we go. Why not both? Can we find something in the middle between centralized and decentralized that would be a good working model for governance for the internet we have today? Not what we want it to be. Oh, there are 2 more shots. Can I have these? No, I'm kidding. I already had my shot backstage. But why not both? Because anytime we get a binary situation, especially in tech, I always want to bust it. I want to smash the binary. I want to think about there's got to be a third way. So, who knows what F word I'm going to say next? Anybody guess? Somebody's playing with my screen. Here we go. Federation. Can we federate? Can we find a way to do this? Now, the definition of federated, I had to go pull something from a dictionary because that's what you do when you give a keynote. You got to give definitions. A federated body formed by a number of nations, states, societies, unions, each retaining control of its own internal affairs. And if you think about how we're operating the internet today and where the tension points are, where different countries want to do different things with their part of the internet, this is where we are today. Something like the Confederation in Switzerland, Confederatio Helvetica. Did you know that that's what CH stands for Switzerland? It's a confederation. So that's government. How do we do this in tech? In tech, we kind of treat it as, okay, you're going to set up something for me and you're going to hand it to me and I'm just going to accept it. Like when you log into another site with your Facebook login, they're basically saying to Facebook, okay, send me your user, we're just going to accept them. If you say they're okay, that's fine with us. Does that ever really work? Does that kind of work? It kind of works and it kind of doesn't work. Federation is usually talked about in the context of identity. So let me give you an example of why federation is not binary. You can't just say, yeah, I'll take whatever you give me. Again, because stupidity and malice, but also other reasons. So when I was CISO of the Texas Education Agency in Texas state government, we had about 1,300 school districts. I don't know how many school districts you have here in Israel, but it's probably fewer than that. We had 1,300, and we had to allow people from each district to log into our applications and access student data that we were responsible for. So we said, okay, for every superintendent, every head of every district, if you say this person works for you, you can set up an account and we'll say, okay. But we're not just going to let them start having access to anything. We still have to check for different reasons. So if District B wants to get access to an application in a particular role that has access to particular data, we would still have to approve it because legally we were required to vet any access to that data because we were responsible for protecting student data of something like 9 million Texas students. And they might also do it on behalf of a different organization, maybe on behalf of their own district where the superintendent said, yes, they work for me, or on behalf of another district where they had a legal agreement that said that people in this district could do things on behalf of the original district. And we'd have to check that too. Do you have an MOU that says that this person can do this on behalf of a different district? So we had to check all of those things. So this explains why federation is almost never completely binary. It's never completely on where you will just take anything. There are parts that you're going to reserve for yourself. And that's where this comes in. Now, does this sound familiar to you? To anybody? I bet you don't know what I'm going to say next. This is the exciting part because I don't know what I'm going to say next either. No, here we go. Zero trust. Does this surprise you at all that this is like zero trust? Most people think of, oh, I don't trust you at all, you can't get access until you jump through all these hoops and everything. That's one way of thinking about it. But the other way of thinking about it is do whatever you want with your own endpoint, with your own phone. But if you want to access our resources, you have to meet our security requirements. And we're going to check, upon login, we're going to check with every session to make sure you're still meeting our requirements. But the rest of the time, we don't care. That's a little bit more like federation. Like we're going to check the things that we care about as stewards of these particular resources, and the rest of the time, you bring what you want. So it's kind of like being at the airport, which is where I'm going tonight. If you want to get on the plane, you have to meet their requirements. They don't know what well, they probably do know what I've done. This is kind of public, isn't it? But they don't know what I've done here in Israel, but what matters is whether I meet the requirements that they have at the point of entry onto the plane. And they have the right at any time to say, nope, you're not doing this. So there are two aspects of this that I want you to think about. There's the issue of risk. What do you have at stake if something goes wrong in anything that has to do with security? And then recourse. Who do you have recourse to? Where do you go to complain or to get a conflict resolved? And those are the two issues that we're going to think about. Here's another example. Besides identity, here's the Fediverse. I know Karen just mentioned Mastodon and things like that. I don't know if people here are using it. I'm on Mastodon. Here's my username. My username is Wendy Nather, and infosec.exchange is the server that I'm registered with. But all of these different servers share content. And the important thing is that it doesn't really matter which instance I'm on. If you're on a different instance and you want to follow me, you can. So you will see all of the things that I post in my feed. It's like if you took Twitter and just kind of blew it up, into little fiefdoms and everything, and everybody agreed for the most part that they were going to share content and spread it around. So there are some servers that serve up imagery, that serve up video, that serve up all sorts of things. So here's the deal. When you have that kind of decentralization, when you have that kind of federation, you can have interactions that can affect everybody else. Here's a post from somebody who described how two admins of two servers had a disagreement. They defederated, which means they broke all of their connections. And then they made up and they refederated, but in the meantime, they broke all their follows for all of the users of those two servers since they were disconnected. And they may not even have known, because this was kind of fast, they may not even have known why their followers and their follows disappeared. So this sort of thing can happen. And it's an example of shared risk in that everybody can be affected by this, but very complex recourse. You'd have to know exactly who defederated from whom, where it broke. You'd have to go to them and say, come on guys, can you make up now? You just broke everything. So this is kind of a tricky part in federation that we have to think about. Another one, a big conflict right now is whether to allow Facebook to federate with the Fediverse. There are a lot of people who say, no, we don't want those janky algorithms. We don't trust Facebook. We think they're going to try to take over. And there are others who say, no, we can always block them later. So here's the discussion about whether the Fediverse should let Facebook federate with them, and how they can protect the users of the Fediverse from the things that they don't want to get from Facebook. And so this gentleman here, Eric, came out with a really long thread. I can't post it here, but if you want to read about it, you can. Some really good examples of how you could come up with a governing model that would protect you and your shared risk against, something that you may want to allow for certain reasons, but you want to restrict other things. So here are the things that we do security to. It's not just identity, it's not just content, it's not just social media. All of these different things potentially are areas that you can make federated decisions or federated policies about. Like, I'm going to take care of this part, you're responsible for this part, I get to make these rules. If I don't like this, I get to disconnect from you. If we don't like this, we get to throw you out. Any of these could potentially be governed by a type of federation. So this is what I'm thinking about now, and I'd like you to help think with me. Which of these things in security could be common or centralized, or should be, and what should be retained by the members, by the federated ones who are responsible for their own parts of the internet? Which parts should we centralize, and what should we not? So here are a few ideas, and I'm just kind of doing these as categories, not being very specific, but areas of asymmetric risk where I stand more to lose than you do. I think I should keep the control that helps me mitigate that risk, because I have more risk than you do. When I talk to bankers, one of the things that they're concerned about with third parties is that, yes, you can offer us service credits if we do something wrong, but the bankers say they don't have as much skin in the game as we do. So therefore, we don't care if they give us service credits, that doesn't help us. So that area should probably be retained. Any area of legal responsibility, like I talked about in state government, where we're required by law to protect something, we cannot give that responsibility away. We can't give it to a third party, so we have to retain it. Exception management. If I don't like something that you're doing and I want an exception to how you're doing it, then I'm going to have to manage that exception myself. And areas of asymmetric cost, where I put a lot more money into some part of the infrastructure than you do, I think I should have more control over it. Now, I can see problems with these things already. You probably can too, but this is where it gets fun. What should be centralized, on the other hand? Areas of shared risk. So where it's going to mess things up for all of us, if somebody breaks something, or areas where we need reliable recourse. If we're going to have conflicts and we need someone to adjudicate, someone to figure this out, we should probably centralize those things, so you only have to go to one place to solve the problem. It can't be consensus anymore. So, do we have any lawyers in the audience? Anybody who's really into public policy? This is your slide. These are going deeper, just thinking about what we might need on the internet. We might need more standards, and I'm sorry, because that probably makes people hurt and say, but I want to do whatever I want to do. This is the wild, wild web. Well, building to code, you don't want buildings collapsing on top of people. I have a friend who was a U.S. Marine, a Marine sniper, and he fell through a staircase. It just split because it was not built to code. This was in another country. But, if it affects people like that, I'm sorry, you can't just build any kind of vehicle that you want, any kind of car. It's got to be roadworthy, because otherwise it kills people. And other management of shared cyber risk. So people are already talking about these sorts of areas. What kind of other standards do we need in order to manage the shared risk better? We should have shared responsibility for security. There are already shared responsibility models between a provider, let's say a SaaS provider, and a customer that says, we take care of this part, you take care of this part. But it's different from provider to provider. It's not exactly the same with AWS and Azure. It's not the same with Facebook. It's not the same with Gmail. All of these things are all slightly different. If we could get them all the same so that if you're a customer, you know what your shared responsibility is across all of these different things, that would help a lot. And especially for security, because that's where things break down, especially in the middle of an incident response where you're trying to go, were you responsible for those logs or were we responsible? Can we see them? No, you can't. You know, that sort of thing. We're struggling with that today. So this is going to end up probably with more trade negotiation, except in the area of cybersecurity, saying, can we rely on the same type of security from each provider regardless of what country you hold allegiance to, regardless of which country you're coming from, regardless of the particular regulations in that area. So bringing this all back to how is this going to deal with stupidity and malice? I think that there are just some things that we shouldn't let just anyone be in charge of. I'm sorry. You know, right now we don't have a manufacturing model of software development where everything gets turned out the same. We have a literary model where everyone can write their own beautiful magnum opus the way they want to do it, with all the flaws that that entails. Maybe we need to restrict that a little bit and say, sorry, you can't set up this kind of server because it's too critical, it's too dangerous. It could easily affect too many other people. We should be more restrictive but in what we accept by default. And that sounds kind of like everybody's got a patch and everybody's got to be better at security, but I think it goes beyond that. We may be approaching the point where we go to people on the internet and saying, you know, you were too accepting of what you received from somebody and look what happened, especially if it affects a population, if it affects other people. We're at the point now where you can be affected by a security breach even if you don't use technology. When water utilities break down, when a hospital closes because of ransomware, that affects people even if they are not technology users. And that is a huge change from when I started here. So we're all an ecosystem, and we have to operate that way. So kind of I'm not sure what to call this because it's not completely binary global federation. This is a sign that I have on my desk to remind myself that there's a lot I still don't know. I don't know, if you have I need a catchy buzzword for this, and I haven't been able to come up with one. Maybe I need another shot, I don't know. So I can tell you one thing for sure, there will be no utopian full global federation where we just accept things from everybody. You know, there will always be a case in which we don't trust a large corporation that is running some essential service. There will always be a case where we have geopolitical differences. We have to take those into account, we have to negotiate, but we still have to work together and we still have to protect one another. So my summary is, and this is what I ended up with last night, frantically trying to finish this talk. I need a summary statement. I believe that we have to tame parts of the wild, wild web in order to let the rest be free. And if you want to talk with me about this, I will be really, really happy to talk about it with you. I love a good knockdown, drag-out fight in the parking lot. So let's go for that. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
All right. Wendy, thank you so much. Yeah, you can leave that there. And we got a little gift for you. So I don't know if you all know this, but here on BSides, we have a tradition. We are a traditional hacker community conference. And what we do is that for each of our guests, we have a little gift, and we also have a little shot glass.